Hey guys, it's Matthew Zachary, and I want to tell you about the National Comprehensive Cancer Network, or the NCCN. The NCCN creates the treatment guidelines for doctors that help cancer patients lead better lives. But I want you to know that the NCCN also has guidelines for you. The patient guidelines were funded by the NCCN Foundation and were created just for people with cancer and their caregivers. They're free, they're easy to understand, and they're available right now for you, the patient and the caregiver. So go check them out at nccn.org/empower. That's nccn.org/empower.
I'm as mad as hell, and I'm not gonna take this anymore!
Hello friends, welcome back. On the show today, Paul Sims perhaps has the most eloquent, mellifluous British accent I've ever had on the show. He is the chief executive officer at Impatient Health, and he calls himself a noisy introvert. I love that. He's kind of a provocateur and a rabble-rouser like me. He was here in studio. We just bonded over a whole bunch of stuff. Paul thinks that patients need pharma to be more daring, experimental, creative, and ambitious. I'm going to go off in the corner, cry in the shower, and drink. Impatient Health is kind of a mix of a think tank and a consultancy. He's kind of like a magnet for fellow provocateurs to really think about, sick care, healthcare, the pharma industries. You could say all you want. We've come so far. We got so much more to go. But, he does really care about what's going on. He works with designer strategists in something like speculative design. And is it possible? Where are the risks? Where are the cracks? Who wants to take the first leap into progress and get over groupthink complacency? All this and more, plus the pandemic, in case you didn't know, has provided humanity with the ultimate catalyst for opportunity. Enjoy the show. I've known of you for so very long.
Okay.
You are notorious in a good way.
Okay.
Not a notoriety thing, but notorious.
Okay.
Different.
What did I do?
No,
wanted in several states.
Well,
Which
I've been told I should know you for a long time, and I'm surprised we've never crossed paths under any
We've
of
done
our,
quite
let
well
alone
to
as
avoid
concert
each other.
pianists.
Yeah. We've done quite well to avoid each
Our
other.
aversion therapy is failing us right now.
We defied the authorities and made it into the same room.
But we finally, like lightning struck once on this LinkedIn post that I wrote, because we're both provocateurs.
Yes.
And I don't get to talk to a lot of provocateurs. If you're a fan of your age is inversely proportional to how many fucks left you have to give.
Yeah, that's the Mark Manson.
So
isn't it? Yeah.
I'm at that point now where I'm more polite than I used to be.
Oh wow!
But you've
gone full circle.
I was polite as a young child. I was precocious as a elementary school, middle school student. I got polite again in high school. College, I became a little raucous. Cancer just made me pissed as fuck.
Yeah, well, that's what it does, right?
Right.
You got nothing to worry about.
And I lost my 20s, but when I became an advocate, I was like the best angry asshole you could ask for at the time, because everything was like, Lance was the big thing back then, but he was political, right? He knew how to see. He was media trained. He was very cautious in what he said. And I'm like, fuck all this. God damn. Like, who's this guy? Like, and they put a mic in front of me at a show. That's how I got started being a strategic asshole.
That's the best sort of startup story I think I've heard in a while.
They put a mic in front of this guy and he started a charity. Yeah, that's kind of how it worked.
Yeah, just... Sorry.
Are you checking your phone?
No, yeah, exactly. I'm bored. I'm just trying to put it on Do Not Disturb because people keep buzzing me.
That's
it's
okay.
Kind of annoying.
Tell me how you really feel. He's literally checking his phone.
Look, I've got it on Do Not Disturb. I'm even showing you the screen now.
But I say I'm more polite because, I can be a little more douchebaggy, but in a professional way.
Right.
And channeling what I think I'm most impressed with about your tone and your attitude and your approach these days is akin to what I feel too, which is I come from consumer.
Right.
I don't come from patient. I used to work in regular consumer brand marketing, selling things like, Texaco and Pepsi, Frito-Lay, Doritos, Dodge. Like that was my world. I ran like new media, IT, creative brand design, desktop for that stuff. So I wasn't a client, but I understood how do you get people to buy shit. So when I approach anything, I think like a consumer. And yet here we are browbeating this, what I call it a flaccid platitude called patient, 2 syllables that mean nothing these days. And I love that you are from this same consumer perspective. Can we be customers as patients? What do you think?
Okay, so this is a much posed question. I reckon that in the US, being, I would say, probably the most commercially oriented country on earth, okay? Like every wall is adorned with some kind of commercial. That calling someone a customer is almost as a bit of a rite of passage, whereas we kind of soft Brits who prefer not to have billboards everywhere and who think that any form of advertising is the spawn of the devil, actually see the word customer as something slightly frightening. So on the one hand, yes, absolutely, we need to damn well have those customer-oriented skills and actually treat people as someone who have a preference and a choice and the freedom and could go anywhere, and you actually have to do something to make them want to come towards you. That is a good frame of reference. But the word customer also, just from my old worldy, Britty kind of background, also frightens me slightly that we're turning into this consumerist society. And frankly, there should be this empty and open space over there in the wilderness where never a brand name shall be found. So I find myself slightly kind of on a knife edge with that one.
When I was thinking of starting the nonprofit, I really wanted to, like, what is disruption in 2006? And I read the book Disruption by Jean-Marie Rijoux, who created Chiat in France in the 1800s. And I remember reading something in there back then about how media in England is different than media in the U.S. And I reread it when I went to London a couple of years ago because I wanted to get a sense of what I should expect to see. Your commercials are so much better than our commercials.
What do you define better?
Well, they're not outlandish. They're not like, attention-grabbing, quick. And interestingly enough, one of the few differences between media in the U.S. and media abroad, we are very direct-to-camera facing in this country. Eye contact on television, people walking and talking, selling you something while they're walking and talking. That doesn't exist in your media. And I love it because it's like, this is toothpaste. It's good. Buy it.
Yeah, but have you noticed that we Brits also don't do eye contact generally anyway? I'm sitting right across your table right now and I feel myself melting by the fact that you're looking at me. So,
Well, I have a face for radio, so you're doing a good job.
Well, yeah. If only your viewers could see the degree of melt that I've been encountering right now.
Well, you are like 9 feet tall. Like you are much shorter on Zoom.
Yes, Zoom is the great leveler on multiple dimensions,
Yes.
and I have been frightening quite a lot of people as restrictions have reduced.
Yeah,
it's really quite funny. Sometimes I can frighten entire groups. I turn up an event or something like that,
right.
and they're all used to sort of seeing that, and they're all like, "Whoa, mama, save me."
Wait, so when were you first exposed to the stupidity of our country's marketing in healthcare?
Well, I think it's pretty insidious. I mean, I came over here as a probably, I don't know, I think I did the standard Disneyland trip at the age of maybe 11 or 12, rite of passage that it was. And I think I was freaked out not only by turning on the TV and seeing what you see. Oh my God. Like, firstly, commercial breaks can last like 10 minutes, 20 minutes, 30 minutes. There's a law in the UK that says you have to have a certain amount of actual programming versus, so that was something that freaked me out. The other thing that freaked me out was sports games that are designed to fit with the TV schedule. So they actually have breaks during the real live games in order to accommodate TV. That also freaked me out. And then, just the number of drug ads. And I was just exposed to it as an 11-year-old. It was like, whoa, what the hell is all of this stuff? And then, more and more, and, celebrity endorsement for erectile dysfunction drugs. I've never quite been able to fully comprehend or understand that. It doesn't.
We are a very easily manipulated society.
And the other thing that just freaked me out was just common conversation about which drugs you're taking. Like it's part of conversation. It's not, and that's maybe because of the fact it's out there on TV, etc. Like people would just talk about what drugs they're on in the corridor. Like no way would a Brit do that.
Right.
No way would a Brit would ever admit having taken any drug ever. And I mean, I've been working in pharma for 20 years, and I don't think I've ever mentioned any medication that I'm on to anyone. Right. In all of that time.
What I find really interesting, again, thinking of like advertising, marketing, branding, it's the Honda Accord. right? It's not the Merck Keytruda. Like, I never understood why they don't associate the company that makes the drug with the person that needs to take the drug. But that begets this idea, like when patients do talk about their medications, they talk about brand. They don't talk about Merck.
Yeah.
And this is like this lost art of understanding how people do communicate in this country. Because you're either a cancer patient, long-term survivor, caregiver. It's not like you're on, or you have breast cancer, right? There's like 80,000 breast cancers and 60,000 different products and drugs you can take for it. And yet they're still like splashing crap everywhere to help you know shit exists and to talk to your doctor. Should people really know what to say to their doctor when they enter that shit happens store?
I think it's almost abusive to the doctor in a weird way. Why should you walk into a doctor's office and say, I want X? Surely that very premise in itself is a kind of denigrating the doctor in many ways. And yes, I mean, it's funny. At the same time, of course, patients should be their own agents of their own health. They should own their own health. They should know what's available and know how to navigate the healthcare system. And that's almost requires a separate degree here in the US, particularly. So on the one hand, yeah, of course, we need that. We need people to feel energized and motivated and own everything to do. And that includes drugs. Drugs is just one small part of it. But to then expect that that you know everything and the doctor does not, I think that tips the balance in a very strange and unusual way. Is there too much consumer power? Is that a thing in the world? Is the customer always right? Is the patient always right? Is there a limit to that? I think that's an interesting question.
Well, just go back to that idiot that spilled hot coffee on herself from McDonald's and like she won the lawsuit.
Right. Yeah.
The customer isn't always right. I'm sorry. You're just avoiding drama by giving them what they want and making them go away. But I agree with you. Like this whole idea of like, here's a drug, you might want to be on it, go tell your doctor. Your doctor should be the authority in that situation. But if you want to bring agency there, it's here's what I care about. Help me live the life I want and recommend what I need to make those goals for myself.
Right.
Or turn on voice memo when you get to the office. That's not clinical. That's just a nice thing to do.
Yeah. See, and you can do those things without necessarily knowing the name of a drug.
Right.
You know, you can figure out what you want in life. You can figure out where you want to go, and you can articulate that to your physician without having to say, I want X.
So what bet did you lose post-pandemic to start this company? Because I look at it, it's pretty radical in terms of like how radical healthcare can be.
I was going to say it's not radical at all, but yeah.
But I mean, like it's contrapuntal to like the straight line that is just this metastatic complacency that this groupthink that I just revile.
Yeah.
But like I want to get to the whole.
But you know, I mean, it's very easy to be somebody working for the pharmaceutical industry and to never risk anything in your life and yet earn a very good above average salary and live your life feeling like you've made a strong impact. And it's complacency is part of the ticket, right? It's almost built in. My job is to raise the temperature and to make us all realize we're on a burning platform because, my God, this industry is a young one, not a mature one. We have so far to go before we have conquered actual healthcare. And, you know, we see big tech coming into our industry. Why? Because we're not, as a pharmaceutical industry, you know, because there is so much more to health than just the drug. Right. And that's unfortunately all we know how to do.
Wait, that sounds so controversial. How dare you, sir?
Yeah, well, I think everyone knows it, but I don't think anyone denies this stuff. It doesn't mean, however, that they look up outside of their very narrow field of vision and do anything about it. So my job here is to raise the temperature, to not allow anyone to coast, to not allow anyone to work in their own little fiefdom, because actually we all know that silos are dangerous. We all know that that just focusing on, you know, we could be rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic for all we know in many of the organizations we work in.
I mean, I don't throw the employees under the bus. These are human beings that are in this job, probably pay the bills and make a living. But most of them, I mean, I don't paint broad brushes and make enemies here on the show, but they're people that care. People that work for these companies have kids with leukemia and family that died. But so I don't blame the people or their job descriptions. The complacency comes from risk averseness, and we're just so used to doing it this way. Why should we think any differently?
So who should we blame then? Because I think I do blame the employees. I'm sorry, I do.
No, I blame the lawyers.
You blame the lawyers, okay?
Yes, because risk averseness comes from litigatable actions and FDA slaps.
Yeah, but do you not find that we overinterpret the law? Like, what's weird for me
No,
is that
lawyers
every
overinterpret
pharma
the law.
company, maybe, every pharma company though interprets the regulations differently. You find some companies that are more relaxed in certain areas and some that aren't. So why is it so subjective? Why is doing the same thing at one company against the internal law, shall we say, and completely acceptable at another? Why can I work with some companies and I can work with patients in certain countries, and then I go and work for another company and I can't work with patients in that same country just because 5 years ago they did something in that country that was controversial and they got their hands wrapped or whatever it is, and that suddenly means that country is closed off to being part of the patient advocacy spectrum for that company.
Well, the cautionary is also that they have shareholders, and they can't risk any reputational, they can't risk any risk because at the mercy of this might dip their stock prices and upset the people
at what point do you become so bland and riskless that you actually you start hurting yourself?
Wait, have you met today's pharma companies?
Yeah, well, yes, I have. And the funny thing is that in certain instances, again, it's a subjective way. Some of them show a little bit of humanity. Some of them realize that they actually have to be humans, not corporate brands, to have any form of interest. Like, I look at some CEOs and they just get no traction whatsoever because they are robotic. They have been finessed to within an inch of their life by corporate comms, and they can't communicate to people anymore. They speak as if being pulled by strings and puppeteers. And even when you talk to the people who pull those strings, the people in corporate comms, they're like, yeah, I totally get it, but it's just kind of what I have to do in my job. Yeah, I yearn for freedom. I yearn to be able to take the shackles off and be human and actually speak to people like real people. But it doesn't happen.
On that light note, let's take a quick break.
Have we started?
I think we're still here.
Okay.
Right,
I was just having a lovely chat with you.
That's right. I love the show. You're great. This is fantastic. All right, we'll be right back.
Okay.
The COVID-19 pandemic showed us how a microscopic virus could upend our lives and how unprepared our society was for it. There's so much more out there that we need to understand, which is why I recommend subscribing to Crooked Media's America Dissected, hosted by former Detroit Health Commissioner Dr. Abdul El Sayed. Each week, Dr. El Sayed sits down with doctors, scientists, culture makers, and policy leaders to ask questions like, how could new genetic discoveries change our relationship with our own genes? How could addiction to social media change our brains? Or how even climate change could make the next major pandemic more likely? To hear discussions on these topics and more, check out America Dissected from Crooked Media. New episodes drop every Tuesday. Listen on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. In stalking All That Is You, I love your 7-syllable boilerplate as a noisy introvert.
All right, okay.
Did you make that up, or did someone just call you that one day angrily?
Well, I made up. So I left my previous company early in the pandemic. What was it, like April, May 2020? And I needed something to say before I'd figured out what I was going to do. And I wrote Pharma provocateur on there. And I put all of 2 seconds thought into it. And then people started going, oh, yeah, that's pretty cool. And that was fine. But then people very much kind of almost expected me to be provocative in absolutely everything I did. And some people almost thought that I was becoming a bit of a sort of charlatan just a kind of bull in a china shop, I guess. And eventually I decided that, considering it was an accident that I'd written that in the first place, I needed something else. So I just thought, well, you know what? I used to run big events for a living, and that was terrible because I used to have to talk to everyone. And
Do you hate people like me?
Yeah, a little bit.
I like a person.
Yeah.
People.
Yeah. Networking was like my worst thing ever, and yet I created networking products for a living. And I just, all I craved really was to be in a dark room figuring stuff out on my own. That was a bit like you in your man cave. And
yes.
Yeah, kind of where we are now. It's why I kind of walked in and thought, my God, I belong.
We are the same person.
Exactly. No one knew it.
I'm just half your height.
You're just an extension.
Yes.
And yeah, I just thought, I'm an introvert. I'm just going to say so. But I am quite noisy because I say what I have a low boredom threshold. I find there's a lot of crap spoken in our industry, a lot of also non-statements of exactly the type I just described, with people being wooden and over-processed in their public communication. And I just thought, I don't have to follow any rules. I'm going to be a noisy introvert. I
would say the unsilent minority would be us, right?
I have to steal that one for next time.
You could be the unsilent. You're chairman of the Unsilent Minority Club.
I love that one.
I mean, there's just so many layers to go down in all that you are and everything you do. But I love that you do think of the word consumer, as much as that is an American trope, and that's how I have to lean into it. And you have such an incredible perspective as being, not from this country and having like, how the hell is it this way in this country? It's so like bass backwards here. But I have to think that if you're really going to need, let's say, American voters who happen to be patients as citizen and consumer, whatever, if you need them to be educated, but they're going into like healthcare is a retail store you never want to shop in. I always say that, like every show I say, I can't wait to get cancer and listen to that Keytruda podcast, right? No one anticipates needing this shit. So how do they know how to protect themselves against the mercy of, honestly, an entire system built by design to place profits over outcomes? And yet better outcomes would normally make more profit.
That's a really difficult question.
I'll see myself out now.
Yeah, I know, exactly. Geez, I'm just going to sit here in silence while I ponder that for 5 minutes before I can say anything. Repeat it for me one more time. We can cut this out if we need to.
No, it's fine. All right. For the cheap seats across from me.
Yeah, please.
The whole point is that when you're a consumer, you are usually in charge of your choices.
Yes, indeed.
And you can research, like the TV's on sale here, Black Friday's here, whatever it is. And yet healthcare is not a market where you get to choose what you think is best for you, which in some cases is good. You want a doctor to make the best choice for you. But oftentimes, there's something on this shelf that you don't know about, or you can't afford the thing you'd like to have, or something just shows up that you couldn't possibly anticipate. You buy a car, you could get an accident. There's insurance for that. But your insurance company, again, USA conversation, always decides what's best for you, regardless of what you think is best for you.
Yeah, so what you're saying is, I believe that thinking consumer in the same way that we described a moment ago is always a healthy thing to do, whether you have the agency of choice or not. Clinical trials should be designed not just to be patient-centric, but to be patient preferential. We talk about cure as a care option a lot these days, and trial as a care option. And what we absolutely require, therefore, is to make this thing preferential by design. And whether the consumer has a choice or not, we have to make it something they want to do, because actually, you're wrong. You're wrong because we still have a choice ultimately. We have a choice whether or not to bother getting up out of bed and look after ourselves. We have a choice whether to take that medicine or not. We have a choice whether to go for that surgery, be it life-saving or not. The adherence rates on blood transfusion medication are low, despite that being the very thing that will keep you alive. So the truth is that we do have choice, even when faced with the starkest black and white life or death, walk off the edge of a cliff type decisions. And we better start as an industry hitting consumer preferences. Like the other conversation that happens every day is, oh, look at what's happened to the consumer during the pandemic and how, the content preferences have all been shaped by Netflix. And therefore, when we are providing education to patients or to HCPs, we have to hold ourselves to the same standards. I actually agree with all that stuff, because the truth is that health information, if it's not engaging in any way, you won't read it very, very much. And I'm not saying that all scientific research has to somehow become sensationalist all of a sudden and grip you like a journalist might. Of course not. But if the number of people and the amount of engagement they have with a subject, if that is completely ignored and we're not open-minded into how the hell we produce that engagement, then we are always going to produce lesser of an effect that we could have done. So I think it saves well to be mindful of consumer preference in everything we do, even if it is a life or death situation where you think the patient has no choice.
So I understood most of that, Mr. Smarty Pants.
That's a record.
No, the part that really just stuck out there was like the baselessness of ennui that belies every pharma commercial. Mm-hmm. I mean, again, you could throw anyone under the bus for that. I think the creative is great. It's well produced. But how is there so much tone deafness in what I call like pay, spray, pray strategies?
For exactly the same reason we said before. Companies can get away with something that is not particularly interesting. It will, cover half their market. It will get enough people through the door. It will hit their targets. And the truth is that America has been, this is going to sound really rude, a fat society. And by that, I don't mean fat as in the usual.
No, I represent that.
I don't mean fat as in the amount of fatty substances in your body. I'm talking about the margins that we've had on drugs and in many products, but particularly those in pharmaceuticals. We did not actually have to try very hard until relatively recently. I was having a conversation over this last night at dinner with the head of sales for a major top 10 pharma company here in the US. And this is exactly what he said. We didn't have to try. And so this guy was actually from Europe, like me. He'd come over to the US 6 years ago. And we Europeans always think that the US is ahead of everything. Like we used to get, just even silly things like the fact that movies used to come out first in the US.
Right.
And then like 2 months later they'd come out, when the whole world when the US was now bored of it, we'd finally get access. We've always had this idea that the US is the most advanced and the most ahead society. This guy said, no, coming to the US and working in commercial pharma was like stepping back 10 years because of the simple fact that it hadn't had to have got as sophisticated as it had in Europe. You hadn't had to work with the margins and the lean situations that they've had to elsewhere. And as a result, haven't had to sort of push it, been able to get away with it. And I think a large amount of that culture still pervades today in D2C advertising and probably many, many other aspects of our industry.
Did any one particular commercial show up where you just like did a spit take because it was so stupidly funny?
I've been in the US now for a day and a half. And I cannot bear to turn the TV on. And by the way, this is during World Cup season, and I still haven't turned on the TV. That, for a European, requires serious restraint.
I'm not a sports guy. I don't watch the World Cup. I mean, being taped as the World Cup is happening now as we tape this conversation. I would love to get some. You know how they always review like the Super Bowl ads because that's the time. I can imagine the World Cup has similar ads going on about just
no. I mean, I watch the BBC. No ads at all.
No, in America.
Oh, right.
If we're watching the World Cup,
I can't turn on the TV here.
But I mean, how many? I'm curious, like because they know who watches these sports. So like, if there's a drug ad during the Super Bowl, it's probably like some kind of like statin. I want to know, like,
so kindly put.
Do Americans are Americans more fit who watch the World Cup? Like, there's no pharma ads during the World Cup.
It's ironic, isn't it? Those who are watching the most sport, not necessarily doing the most.
You can tell a lot by the demographic by what drug ads are run during it.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, it's insane. I literally cannot turn the TV on while I'm here.
Oh, it's terrible.
I could watch maybe a little bit of Netflix because it's obviously
what's even scarier in this country is the ads are meant for you.
That was
like someone else watching that TV show is not going to see the same
for
ads.
you and the same as Hitler needs you.
Yeah, oh God. Hitler trending again for some reason.
Yeah.
When you see ads on your phone on digital products, they're there because it knows who you are. TV's different because TV's, paint spray. But this whole notion of when a drug ad pops up for you on Twitter or on Facebook, they know that you might want to have this drug. Like, I don't need blah, blah, blah at all. There's something wrong with me. Well, they think you do.
Yeah, and say it enough times and you start believing it. I think that happens with anything.
You had written a predictions review in 2021 for this year.
Right.
I killed a lot of trees printing this out because I can't read PDFs on a tiny monitor. I barely got through it because it's just so comprehensive. I mean, you were really bored during the pandemic, clearly. But one thing stuck out. And on the very first thing in this prediction is that a pharma company will buy the consumer. I'm like, there's that word again. What did you mean by that?
Gosh, I wrote that one such a long time ago. I barely even remember. But I think
Fake it till you make it.
Yeah, I will. Maybe I should read it again. You've got it in front of you. I can't see it.
Should I just read it?
Yeah, just read it for me.
I'm going to read it verbatim here. This was the idea that Big Pharma is increasingly focused on becoming Ferrari, i.e., developing only specialty products, highly priced, designed for a small segment of the population. But the pandemic would expose the neglected middle, the chronic disease areas that required more attention and could be delivered by those outside R&D. We have one listener left, by the way.
Thank you, listener.
Yes, thank you, Mom. She's my listener. She's the only one left.
And if you're listening and you're not the mom of our host, then you're going to be slightly free.
I don't know. 23 new mom might disagree with me. But again, this is the same conversation.
Yeah. So, we all know the pharmaceutical industry has pivoted towards specialty and even orphan products, which is fantastic if you are the sufferer of said specialty or orphan disease. But the truth is the health burden is elsewhere. It's a strange world, isn't it, where that's why I call it making a Ferrari. It's as if the entire automotive industry decided to make a Ferrari. And Ferraris are perfectly good cars. They go fast, they look great, they, probably make you look 10 years younger, but they...
Very niche.
Yeah, but not everyone is suited to a Ferrari. And I think the reason I use this analogy, which some people obviously don't like, particularly those who are suffering from said diseases, is because we've lost our sense of where need actually is, where the population actually needs. And by the way, there are obviously more people outside the US than there are inside it. And the great health need, of course, is elsewhere in most of the world. I think it's a bit sad that our industry can only make money out of niche populations and niche diseases. I think that says a lot, not just about our industry, but also about the system it operates in.
Foolish armchair response is, when I was diagnosed a billion years ago, there were 4 drugs. That was it. That was the platinums and radiation. That was it. Everything Sidney Farber invented was still there in the 90s. And now there's a billion things based on what I used to call cancer geography is dead. And now your DNA geography is what matters most. But when you're making a drug for a rare disease community and there's only 3,000 of them, that's the Ferrari they need. But they'll only benefit from that Ferrari. Is that analogous to what we're saying? Because that seems to be where the trends are now.
If you're part of that 3,000 or whatever it is, then of course you're going to be grateful. But what about the 3 million over there?
Right.
What about the fact that obesity still eludes us so heavily, cardiovascular diseases, disease of the brain? There are so many things that we're not focusing on that we actually need to figure out a way. And I'm not blaming the industry because the industry is a product of where are the opportunities, the commercial opportunities, and if they're going to exist, especially. I just think it's kind of crazy that we have a system that doesn't reward anything except the drug. In a way, it's very hard to get reimbursed for digital health products, which we all want to focus on. It's very hard to get reimbursed for other things that could move the needle. So we talk about all focusing on health outcomes, but are we truly? I don't think that the reimbursement system has basically kept up with health need.
Well, that's a whole different podcast.
Yeah, I'll book myself in for that one next
I
time.
will drink an entire bottle of bourbon before that show.
It might be necessary
I
before
think,
that show.
and it's not reimbursable either. That's out of pocket bourbon.
Yeah, I don't know. You could expense that one with some legitimacy.
Yeah. A lot of the stuff you're doing now is because of the impact of the pandemic, which, we're still trying to figure our way out of this, and we're not even over with it yet. As much as Florida thinks it never happened, it's still there. But, impatient health. I love, again, I'm a big fan of like punny puns, out of patience, impatient health, we the patients, be patiently waiting, all things. Yeah, it's great. But, where did the incentive come out of your brain to say, I'm doing this now?
Boredom.
That's the best answer.
Boredom and I don't mean boredom as in sitting around. I've never been bored for even a minute in my life. I mean boredom with the lack of anything that inspired me in our industry at all. The boredom of just always focusing on the vanilla. Like, we are just vanilla, aren't we, as an industry? Mm-hmm. And any great innovator, I say that in inverted commas, that we strive
inverted commas.
Yeah, so like a Henry Ford will say, if I had asked the consumer, they would have wanted a faster horse. A Bob Dylan will say, never play to the gallery. You've just got to go out there and be yourself. It's the only way to make it work. Steve Jobs, obviously, famously did not rely on heavy market research. I just think that people don't know what they want. And we take no effort to decide for ourselves what we should give people. And okay, so this is, I can hear the people screaming. I can
smell your brain by the way right
I can smell the angry tweets coming in. We have to lead with solutions. I call it customer leadership. We have to lead with the first idea. We have to do a bit what the automotive industry does. The automotive industry makes concept cars, these weird flying, bizarre, how the hell does that even drive type stuff that will never be sold. But they actually build it. They spend millions of dollars building these things. Why? Because only then could you get a reaction. Do you get a reaction from a consumer, customer, patient, whatever, that says, oh my God, that's ugly. Oh my God, that's cool. Oh my God, imagine you could turn the seats on the way in if you've got a self-driving car and have like almost a sort of people looking at each other in a car. Concepts that don't exist in the mainstream yet, but could well do. And I just think if we ask patients everything that we do, then we'll never do anything beyond the vanilla. We have to try creating with the incredible brain power and the incredible resources we have within this industry. We should be able to put concepts out there that are really interesting. I always say if Elon Musk can get us excited about batteries, then we surely as hell.
Or boring underground.
Or boring underground, and even calling a company the boring company. Then, my God, why can't we in this industry, in supposedly the most emotive industry of all, supposedly the most innovative industry of all, get people excited about the future of healthcare? Why can't we provide a vision, even if we're not providing an actual object that people could use, a vision of what healthcare could look like? That's the type of communication I would like to see our leaders or even anyone in our organizations offering. I think that, why should it be up to, tech companies to give us a vision of the future? Okay, why should Mark Zuckerberg paint his picture of the metaverse, crap as it was?
Yes.
Why the bloody hell shouldn't Pharma paint a picture of what the future could look like and dress it up with a nice video to try and bring it to life?
Well, Paul Sims, you don't need a soapbox because you're already, 6'6" or something like that. I see this I see this show as an ongoing series of not V Paul, but maybe Ford versus Ferrari.
Yeah. Okay. Fine. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. That was a movie. Yeah.
I love this conversation. There's so much more we can unpack the next time you're here. But just exiting this conversation, final thoughts. Is there one idea? There probably isn't. What does pharma being more daring mean? If there's a short answer to that question, I just said there's no short answer, we'll be out.
Okay. I can actually answer that quite surely. I would say being scientific. I will explain that though. Scientists experiment. We think of scientists like the boffins at the front of the classroom, the geeks that keep it safe. No. Scientists thrive off their curiosity, and they never make assumptions. They test everything. They are experimental. I think that we need to be scientific outside of the R&D department. I think we need to be experimental. I think we need to try stuff. We call ourselves scientific companies on damn well should try and be scientific companies then. And we should not just be going for the safe option every single time.
Paul Simms, you heard it here. The voice, the height, the face for radio like me. Chief Executive at Impatient Health. All the links in the episode description. This man, you got to know him. You got to love him. I fell in love. He walked in the door. He's here. Paul, thank you.
Thank you for the invitation. And frankly, if you want to kind of say that, just, stand in front of me and say that as I go around the world. That would be really appreciated
today.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. See you next time, friends. Thanks for listening. Out of Patience with Matthew Zachary is an OffScrip Health production. The executive producers are Matthew Zachary and Andrew McDowell. It's mixed and edited by Kyle Moore. If you like the show, ratings and reviews are always welcome. Leave us a message anytime at 855-AUDIO-66. That's 855-AUDIO-66 to share your healthcare shitness with us, and we might just play them on the air on a future episode. For more information about this show and OffScrip Health, visit offscrip.com. That's offscrip, no T.com.